Hello and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Heated primary races are happening today in Alabama, Georgia, Virginia, and people in the nation's capital are taking their pick for mayor. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details on some key races.
Democrats on Capitol Hill hold a slim majority, and Republicans are vying to flip House seats in Virginia. Voters in the state recently elected Republican Governor Youngkin over the state's former Democrat governor.
We're going to see in November not just a red wave, but a tsunami.
That's Senator Ted Cruz campaigning for Republican candidate Yesli Vega Monday night on the eve of today's primary elections. Vega is running against 5 other Republicans in Virginia's 7th district. The winner will face current Congresswoman Spanberger, a Democrat, this November. District 2 is another key seat for Republicans. 4 candidates are vying for the Republican nomination today. The victor's goal is to flip the seat of Democrat Congresswoman Elaine Luria. And in the nation's capital, voters are deciding whether to keep current Mayor Muriel Bowser in for a 3rd term, or if it's time for a change.
And she's done a very good job in a very bad situation. Yeah, I'm hoping she gets reelected, considering that her opponents, they didn't seem to offer that much of a change, or maybe it was a change we didn't really approve of.
One change proposed by Bowser's opponent, Robert White, is police reform. His campaign promises have resonated with some younger voters.
I just appreciate that he is interested in allocating resources more towards social services and to other departments that instead of necessarily the police force. I think the police are fantastic. It's just that they're overwhelmed. They can't do every job. They're not a social worker.
So I just cast my ballot for him.
Voters in the district are also casting their ballots for their congressional delegate. As for down south, former President Trump's endorsement power is put to the test in Alabama, as Congressman Mo Brooks faces Trump pick Katie Britt in a runoff for the Republican Senate nomination. The winner will face Democrat William Boyd in the midterms to see who will replace retiring Republican Senator Richard Shelby. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Twitter's board has unanimously recommended that shareholders approve Elon Musk's $44 billion bid to buy the platform. In a statement filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission today, the Twitter board said it supports a shareholder vote in favor of Musk taking ownership of Twitter. The statement said that if the merger is completed, stockholders will receive about $54 in cash per share. That is about 40% above the current stock price. Twitter shares rose about 1.3% to just above $38 today, which is still well below Musk's offer price. The Supreme Court decided on a case that will allow religious schools to receive public funding alongside other private schools. The ruling came after parents in Maine brought a case against a policy that did not allow children access to financial aid at private schools that promote religion. Maine parents argued that not allowing families to access public funding for schools based on religious values violates First Amendment rights. The justices ruled 6-3 to toss out the policy. The 6 conservative justices voted for, and the 3 liberal justices voted against the changes. A new report by the National Association of Scholars found that Chinese communist propaganda, once delivered to U.S. college campuses through Confucius institutes, now continues under a new name. Over the last 4 years, more than 100 Confucius institutes were shut down after the FBI, State Department, and Congress found them to be sources of CCP propaganda and espionage. But the Chinese regime found other ways to influence American campuses by offering rebranded replacement programs. The report found that dozens of American institutions maintained their relationships with the CCP affiliate by opening up similar programs. The National Association of Scholars found out about this by filing Freedom of Information requests. Indiana Congressman Jim Banks has been sounding the alarm bells over the threats the Chinese Communist Party poses to the American homeland. He's introduced multiple bills aimed at thwarting the CCP's influence in the U.S. Today, he is warning of the threat that the CCP and their backed organizations pose on our college campuses. We had a chance to ask him about this earlier. Congressman Jim Banks, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Congressman, could you just give us a little bit of an idea as to why you think the Confucius Institutes and other entities of the like pose such a threat to the United States?
Well, fortunately, under President Trump, for the first time ever, we had an administration that took the China threat seriously, and we saw almost every Confucius Institute in America shut down on Donald Trump's watch. Unfortunately, with Joe Biden in the White House, we're seeing the opposite. The Confucius Institute and the threats that they pose, espionage on college campuses, malign influences at American universities through Confucius Institutes, have come back under different names. The threat is still there. In fact, it's growing because we have an administration that isn't just turning a blind eye, they're welcoming a rise of Chinese malign influence in the United States. Again, it's shameful. We can't do much about it with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats who control the Congress completely ignoring the threat. But if and when Republicans gain back the majority in the midterm elections, we'll have an opportunity to address these threats again.
Congressman, how concerning is it that the experts on some of the campuses, Harvard, Fairbanks Center for China Research, have been compromised or at the very least influenced by the Chinese government?
Well, it's greatly concerning. The examples are many. I read a list of examples to the Heritage Foundation here this morning of examples of malign CCP influences on college campuses in America that continue to be prevalent today. When you have researchers at Harvard and other major institutions in America, you have institutions that receive federally funded grants to research sensitive, even national security related projects, and they use researchers or students who come with a specific purpose to infiltrate and send that important sensitive research and its conclusions back to our biggest adversary. It just goes to show you that the universities are a big part of the problem. So we need better guardrails on how research is funded in America and who's participating in that research. And there needs to be more accountability. And I've introduced a number of pieces of legislation that would provide better oversight, better guardrails, and then hold these universities accountable who turn a blind eye to the threat that's obviously something that is growing throughout the United States.
Congressman Jim Banks, thank you so much.
Thank you.
With President Biden considering the removal of some China tariffs and the resurgence of a CCP-affiliated organization in the United States, many are concerned over the direction of the country. After speaking with Congressman Banks, we also had a chance to speak to Rochelle Peterson about her new book, After Confucius Institutes. Here's what she said. Rochelle Peterson, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Rochelle, please tell us about your book here, After Confucius Institutes. What have you discovered?
Well, basically, Confucius Institutes have been a central node of the Chinese government's overseas influence operations. We thought they had pretty much died out in the United States, but it turns out they have reincarnated themselves under a variety of new names. So the problem isn't gone, it's just been renamed and become a lot harder to track. So that's what we're exposing in this new report.
It's interesting. You're saying that they've renamed themselves. Just the whole name of Confucius Institute sounds like a renaming of sorts. So how do you fight this subtle ideological battle?
Well, the first part is to expose it and to name it and show that this, once we thought this was a policy victory, but actually the problem has come back. And then the next step will be to use some of the same policies that targeted Confucius Institutes and bring them to bear against these new programs and really go after the Chinese government more aggressively and make it harder for colleges and universities to fall for some of these programs that the Chinese Communist Party is spreading.
And could you tell us what types of things or programs that you're seeing starting to pop up under the guise of whatever the new name might be?
So officially there's still Chinese language and culture programs, but it's Chinese culture as approved by the Chinese Communist Party. So no ethnic minorities, no religious minorities. You won't get a straight answer on Tiananmen Square, on the status of Tibet or Taiwan. It's everything the Chinese government would want you to know about China and nothing else.
And what types of operations, or what do you think their motivation is with these types of programs?
Well, the goal is to win the hearts and minds of American youth and make them think well of the Chinese government, of the Chinese Communist Party, and want to go along with the Chinese Communist Party's goals. But it's also a way to have a strategic outpost on a college campus and keep an eye on Chinese students who are studying abroad, keep an eye on research and technology that's developing at the university, and just have an ear to the ground. So it's really a strategic place for the Chinese government to be.
And do you think there's anything that the United States government can do to kind of push back on these?
Absolutely. The U.S. government should consider instituting a tax on Chinese gifts to colleges and universities, or even putting a cap on the amount of money that they can receive from Chinese sources before jeopardizing eligibility for federal funds. Those kinds of aggressive policies will wean colleges and universities away from this Chinese government funding and protect students from the kinds of propaganda that the Chinese government is spreading.
Rochelle, thank you so much for your time and congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.